Mrs. Shabana Azmi to our national event for the year 2020. I also extend my gratitude and appreciation to our guest of honor, YFLO National President, Ms. Janvi Fukan. We're pleased to have you here with us.
Shubha Sayantram. Good evening, YFLO Hyderabad. I'm delighted to be here today.
I would like to now introduce our moderator for the session, Ratna Rao Shekhar.
What was your relationship with her as you got older and she got older?
I think that that although my relationship with my father is most celebrated, I was equally close to my mother, and she has taught me extraordinary.
Sonali.
Good afternoon, everyone. I, Sonali Saraf, YFLO Secretary, Apurva Pokarna, YFLO Chairperson, and our YFLO Committee welcome our panelists, Ms. Vasvi Bharat Ramji, Ms. Savita Menonji, Ms. Anjum Babukhanji, and our moderator for today, Mr. Hridyash Deshpandeji, YFLO Past Chairs, YFLO Committee, Chapter Chairs, and members to our YFLO program, Shaping the Next Generation. A piece of information I would like to share with all of you. We will turn off the videos for the moderated session for better clarity. Kindly cooperate. If anyone has any questions, please put them with your name in the chat box, and Hridyash will take it in the end of the session. When darkness comes, let us not condemn the dark, but light a lamp to illuminate. On that note, can we now have the lighting of the lamp, please? He who plants a tree plants hope, and therefore we are felicitating our guest by planting trees in their honor. Can we now have the felicitation slide for Vasvi, please? Savita ji. Anjum ji. Hridyash ji. I now invite Apurva, our YFLO chairperson, to address the meeting and introduce our guest.
A very good morning to all. As Nelson Mandela once said, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. It is the tool that guides us, makes us, strengthens us, shapes our next gen future. It is in our very first YFLO event of the year, Meher Padamji said that education is the biggest leveler in society. When you are educated, you have unlimited choices in life. Change is inevitable, and one can certainly never have too many opportunities to learn from. With that thought, YFLO Hyderabad brings to you a power-packed session today. Let's discuss the policy, its interpretation, and key areas of development. Our first panelist is Mrs. Vasvi Bharatam. She is the joint vice chairperson of the Sri Ram schools, which have been consistently rated as one of the top schools in India. She's on the governing board of Lady Shri Ram College, one of the first and most prestigious Women's College of India, and Wellam Girls School, boarding school for girls in Dehradun. She's also on the boards of SRF Foundation, Charities Aid Foundation, India, and Save the Children India, all of which work towards providing a better quality of life to the underprivileged of our country. Our next panelist is the author of ABCs of Brain, Compatible Learning, and TEDx speaker, Dr. Anjum Babu Khan. She's an award-winning educationist and empowering trainer. She provides key insights for educators, parents, and lifelong learners to navigate education in the 21st century. She states, multiple intelligence is the foundation upon which each learner's journey is curated to develop their multifaceted human potential. Our third panelist is Savita Dati Menon. She has over 30 years of experience and is an expert in all areas of mental health and positive psychology, covering parenting issues, children and development issues, to name a few. Dr. Menon was a co-faculty Harvard Medical School for a series of lifestyle medicine seminars conducted in India in 2006. She is the faculty Apollo Medical College and other medical and engineering colleges. She has worked with intellectually disabled children and Special Olympics International as the Global Clinical Advisor India. Our moderator for this session today is Mr. Hridayash Deshpande. He has been in the field of education for over 26 years. Presently, Hridayash is the member of governing board and director of Ajinkya D.Y. Patil University. He is the member of CII National Committee on Design. He has been the jury member of Good Design Awards, Japan, as well as Taiwan's International Student Design Competition. Hridayash is an experienced, enthusiastic, and energetic educator and innovation facilitator. We welcome you all, and now I hand over the session to Mr. Deshpande.
Very good morning to all of you, and it's a great pleasure to be moderating this really power-packed session with a lot of wonderful participants. I see a lot of them joining and the numbers are building up. So I'm quite excited to hear all three of my panelists today on a very important session, on a very important title of the session around the national education policy. And there could have been no better panel than this, I suppose, to have spoken about various aspects of the policy, and that's what I think we will explore and learn from all of them. They themselves are enlightened, and I'm sure they will enlighten us more today, and they will spread that knowledge that they possess within them amongst all of us. Because since the national education policy was announced, we have all been very curious as to what it would entail for each of us, for our children, and mainly for the future of our nation. Policy has been largely very much appreciated across the sectors, across the experts, and across the institutions. So that's a good beginning normally to a policy which has such a huge impact, probable impact on the future of the nation. So let's begin without any ado about it and without taking any more time. And what I would like to do is first go to Ms. Vasvi and ask her that this national education policy has been long awaited. There have been many versions that came before and they were never adopted. There were a lot of discussions around it, but this one got adopted. So what do you see that this policy brings in real sense as an impact on ground? What do you see that this policy would is likely to do to the future of education in our country?
Thank you, Hridesh. Good morning, Anjum, Savita, Hridesh, Apurva, and all my friends from YFLO Hyderabad and other chapters from across the country. Really happy to be here with all of you today. Anyone who knows me knows that I have always been the biggest advocate of YFLO because I truly believe in the value of fresh ideas and new energy. And I started my journey in flow when I became the chairperson of YFLO Delhi in 2010. a long time ago, exactly 10 years ago today. So that was an amazing experience for me. And I'm very happy to meet some of the committee members here today. And so thank you, Apurva, for inviting me. I'd also like to give a big shout out to all the fathers and mothers who are here today on Sunday morning, who are curious and concerned enough to come in to understand what the NEP holds for the future of education for their children. The NEP is a very interesting document. It has certainly been long awaited. It's been 34 years. It's been made in consultation with all the stakeholders, which is state government, central government, academia, and the general public, which is the best way for any policy to be formulated. It's long, it's 66 pages, and half of it is devoted to school education, and brings with it a lot of hope of transformation of not only education in India, but also the country as a whole. It's huge, but I will speak about some of the areas which I feel will directly impact your children and is good for you to know. You must also know that this is being created for schools across the board. So many progressive schools are probably already doing a lot of the practices that they are suggesting. One of the most important changes is that there is a change in the pedagogical structure. Earlier, Indian education was also always 10 plus 2. I mean, you must have heard that term. Now it has gone from 5 plus 3 plus 3 to 4. 5 is the early childhood years, which would be your play school year, nursery, KG, class 1 and 2. This is to give a greater focus to early childhood, which has been lacking in our country for all these years. The next 3 is class 2, 3, and 4, 3, 4, and 5. The next one is middle school, which is 6, 7, and 8. And the last one is 9, 10, 11, 12. What it has done is it has broken up all these years into different brackets to give the right focus to each one of these areas. And there are different groups of people working on each of these to ensure that each of them is implemented correctly. All of you must have heard of the Right to Education Act. Earlier, Right to Education was for ages 6 to 14. It covered classes 1 to 8. However, now it is ages 3 to 18, which covers all the schooling years, because I think the government realized that at class 8, what happens to these children? And so they have included this in the NEP to ensure that it's free education from nursery all the way to class 12. There is also now a mandated curriculum for preschools, which never used to be there. As you are aware, you know, preschools were mushrooming in homes everywhere. There was no guidelines for them, and there was no quality control. This has been done to ensure that there is some structure and some quality control for preschools. The medium of instruction that they have suggested is to be the mother tongue. Every school earlier was teaching 2 to 3 languages. However, now they have suggested that it should be the home language, the mother tongue, and the regional language. There has been a lot of discussion on this. A lot of people have objected to this. However, nowhere in the policy does it say that English cannot be the medium of instruction and cannot be one of those languages. There is a huge focus on fundamental literacy and numeracy now, because if you see any of the reports, whether it's the ASA report, whether it's the PISA report, you will find that unfortunately India is featuring very low on those reports. And so the government has put a huge focus and said that by 2023, all students should be able to at least read and write up to the level of class 3. They've also talked about introducing summative state level exams in class 3, 5, and 8. There is no clarity in this, and I'm sure there's going to be a pushback. I know, for instance, in Sriram School, we don't believe in giving any exams till class 8. So we do not agree with this. They have also said that vocational education should become part of the curriculum. Every child needs to learn at least one vocational skill, and this will be mandatory from class 6. Things like coding, many schools are doing it, but now they're going to make it mandatory in senior school. There is a huge focus on use of technology. I think this is something that COVID has taught all of us, how technology is going to be part of the learning environment going forward. Technology is going to be used for teaching, learning, assessment. It will help children who have different learning abilities, and technology is certainly here to stay. For the class 10 and 12 board exams, they are also here to stay, but they may be designed differently and happen twice a year. The board is only going to be an examining body going forward, and the curriculum is going to be one national curriculum across the board. One interesting thing is that they have suggested that there should be a multidisciplinary approach. Means that, right now in class 11, you have to choose either a science or an arts or a humanities or, one of the streams. Now they're saying it's going to be multidisciplinary. You can study subjects across the board. Teacher training. There is a huge focus on teachers, which is something I feel very passionate about. There's going to be a teacher entry test. There's going to be better teacher training. And there's also a focus on working conditions for teachers. There's talk about reduction in the curriculum, which is a very welcome change. As you know, our curriculums are huge, which does not leave time for analysis or critical thinking. And also an interesting thing is that they are suggesting a design in the report card to include self-assessment, peer assessment, and teacher assessment. So these are all welcome changes. It's a great vision document. So now we know the what and the why, but what we are all waiting to see is the how. How is this going to happen? Because the success of any policy at the end of the day depends on the implementation, and the challenge is over there. So I'm hopeful. Let's see what happens. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Vasvi. Moving to Dr. Anjum, the policy seems refreshing. Do you first of all agree with it that it is refreshing? And just taking a cue from what Ms. Vasvi just said, that what of the how you would like to actually unfold as a result of this policy?
Yes, so first of all, good morning to everyone, all our FLO friends out there and panelists. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I definitely feel, Mr. Deshpande, that this is a very welcome paradigm shift. It's a move away from the chalk and talk and the rote and regurgitate model that is dominant in most of the country's schools. We also have to acknowledge, and I don't think that it gets enough attention, is I also call it the kill and drill model. So it's the drill and kill model, because we have very, very high suicide rates. And it's very, very unfortunate that the academic pressure that children feel that leads to such a high rate of suicide. So that is something that we need to look into. Aside from that, I feel that sorry, one second. I feel that a lot of the enlightened schools, first of all, I think, Vasavi, you've done an extremely wonderful job of a very comprehensive, very brief, crisp overview of the entire national education policy. So I'm not going to talk about that again. And one thing that I do disagree is that it talks about the what, but I don't think that it really goes into the why. And I love that golden circle that Simon Sinek talks about, that everyone needs to start with the why. Usually people talk about the what. So I think it's very comprehensive in laying out the what, and it defines that very, very beautifully. But I feel that all our best practices in education need to be backed up with, neuroscience, cognitive science, research, a lot of, refreshing thoughts from psychology and education. So these are things that have been around for, I would say, more than a couple of decades. And I think India is just catching up. I've been in education now for 25 years. So a lot of good schools like Sri Ram and Glendale, we have been doing this not only for 5, 10, 15, but more than 20 years. So words such as experiential, words such as multifaceted, the things that define the ages and stages of development according to psychology, these are probably the most essential ideas that is going to bring in a fundamental shift in learning. Mr. Deshpande, I feel that what I have seen after moving from the States 25 years ago is that there was this kind of urgency among a lot of parents in the country, to just keep pushing down the curriculum. So what was taught in first grade was pushed down to, kindergarten. It was pushed down to nursery, and developmentally it was not appropriate. It was like when, children haven't even develop their fine motor skills. They're being made to write, whereas that they should be playing and hearing stories and doing art and, working with manipulative. So I'm really, really happy that the early childhood aspect has now been addressed. So the why is important, and then in terms of the how. So while the what is all defined, I feel the how is going to be a very, very huge thing that the NEP doesn't talk about, and it needs to be talked about, because this huge revamping of the entire system, from syllabus to curriculum to infrastructure and teacher training, having been a teacher trainer for now, more than 20 years, it is a very slow and gradual process, for teachers in the country to learn something that they are not familiar with. They have not been taught that way. So as Alvin Toffler said, that the illiterate of the 21st century is not going to be one who can't read or write. Rather, it's going to be a person who can't learn, unlearn, and relearn. And in the 21st century, we need to keep relearning. So even after you get that B.Ed degree that has been upgraded or will be upgraded, you still have to constantly, keep updating your training. And while, we have gotten a lot of awards and innovative pedagogy and all that, I know the hard work that goes into it, and it's not easy to implement these ideas. So those are just my concerns about the why and the how.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Anjum. Moving to Dr. Savita. What are the fundamental changes you hope to see as a result of this policy? And please, Dr. Anjum spoke about the impact of neurosciences, psychology on education, which has not got the due attention so far. Do you think that attention has come in this policy, or at least its effect?
Thank you so much, Ridesh. First of all, a big hug to all the panelists. Apurva, thanks so much for inviting all of us. Vasavi, Anjum, and our moderator, a big hug to all of you, and good to be here on Sunday morning. Many positives that I hope to see, and I hope that this will actually get implemented. One of the key issues in our country, I think, is that we are brilliant at visualizing, but it's a big question mark when it comes to implementation. Implementation can take long and sometimes, fall by the wayside as well. So I think implementation in our country is a big key. But I feel that change is necessary, and every few decades, this policy is meant to be changed. It was changed right in the beginning in 68, then it came to 86, and now 2020 was about time. So there is something that we have got in terms of a changed policy. It is very good. I'm sure this is not going to be a final blueprint of implementation. I'm sure a lot of comments will come from experts around the country, and there will be some addendums and so on that are made. For instance, I'm a little confused about language. How is this language thing going to be implemented? It's likely to cause more problems than resolution. However, I feel that up to, let's say, 3rd, 4th grade, if children study in their mother tongue, in fact, learning and development actually be more facilitated. One of the things that I found interesting was the attitude of the government. The government has actually renamed the HRD ministry as the Ministry for Education, which means that the intention at any rate is absolutely right. Again, intention is right, but hopefully the implementation will be right as well. Another thing that I found from a psychological perspective that should be really good. And before that, let me ask, the entire group a question. If I ask you to name 1 or 2 teachers from your school that are top of the mind recall for you, and if you just quickly recall 1 or 2 teachers top of the mind, I will be pretty sure that at least one of them will be a teacher who scarred you more than helped you, So the impact of negative is much more on us than the impact of positive. I mean, I hate to say this, but That's what the reality of the situation is. And so one of the things I find very interesting, and this is teacher training. There is a scope for merit-based scholarship for teachers, which hopefully will mean that more people will be encouraged to go into teacher training who are interested in teacher training, and not just, it does happen that I don't have anything else to do, so I will go into teacher training, let's say. So hopefully it will be more interest and attitude and aptitude based teacher training, and not just because it's something to do. Another thing I found very interesting in teacher training is that the way doctors have a CME and they have to get certain number of hours of continuing medical education clocked in every year, now teachers in this policy will be required to do the same thing, and they need to do 50 hours a year. So I find this, if it gets implemented, I find this very heartening. Another thing I find very good from a psychological perspective is vocational education. Not everybody has to go in for pure academic education. There is big scope for the majority of our population to benefit from vocational education. And so far, our percentage is 26.3%. The plan is to increase it to 50%. If we can do that, kudos to everyone. Another thing I feel in metros and tier 1 cities, I'm sure we will benefit from the changes, but I think the bigger benefit will probably go to tier 2, 3, 4 cities. And that's where more of the change is required also, For instance, in metros, there's a lot of other kinds of education that is available, that is international related, and not too much impact will happen in those areas of education from the NAP that has come in. But in the other tier cities, that is not too much available. So there will be definitely a big impact, in the other tier cities, I feel. I think one of the things I'd like to say is also that there is hope for holistic development. You are actually going to have sports and all what was considered to be extracurricular activities, sport. So you will probably have marks for all of these categories included in your 10th and 12th study and examinations, and not just to leave them as extracurricular. So if you're really good in something, then it's a hobby, but it can never mainstream into education. So I think that is, again, a big change that I see in terms of holistic development, even in the 10th and even in the 12th curriculum. And that exams will stop becoming killer exams. And I say killer exams because 10th and 12th exams are like a home for anxiety, for panic attacks, and for suicidal ideation. This is like a reality in our country. So if the exams are more holistic, if the exams become, as they claim, become more on core concepts, become more on clarity of concepts and vision, become more on analytical skills, and not just on the skills that you have acquired by rote. So it's not a true test of your knowledge, but just a test of how good you are in terms of rote learning. If these things happen, then I think hats off to this policy. However, the policy starts in 2020-21, and the vision is to take it to 40. So I'm sure it's going to be a slow and steady implementation. Thank you.
Thank you, all of you so far. And before we move further, there is a nice video that has been compiled by YFLO Hyderabad, taking in the views about NEP from across the country, from different kind of stakeholders. So it would be a really great thing to watch in this session. So may I request Purvaji to play the video.
The NEP talks about the different educational stages in a person's life, beginning from preschool till university, which believes very strongly in the empowerment of individuals. It believes in empowering the child, it believes in empowering the adult, the teacher. It believes in quality controls, it believes in setting high standards in education.
Vision of the National Education Policy 2020, an education system that contributes an equitable and vibrant knowledge society by providing high-quality education to all. which develops a deep sense of respect towards the fundamental rights, duties, and constitutional values bonding with the one's own country, and a conscious awareness of one's role and responsibilities in a changing world.
I think the proposed reforms in NEP will help the students develop knowledge and necessary skills for a prospective career and lifelong learning by virtue of the dynamic changes in developing holistic curriculum and, of course, formally introducing early childhood education in the 5+3+3+4 model. The shift, of course, from teacher-centered to student-centered learning with focus on skill development is the absolute need of the hour.
He's saying equal emphasis will be given to the other disciplines like art, dance, music, and the students will have the liberty to choose the subject of their choice.
Educational stages in a person's life, beginning from preschool till university. I'm very happy that they are addressing the preschool phase of a person's life, that maximum learning or absorption of ideas or of knowledge honestly takes place in the early years of a person's life. And therefore, if the foundations of literacy, of numeracy, of ideas, of concepts are laid well, then these become the building blocks for the future.
One major point here I would like to mention is the multiple entry and exit. Because even if you take 1 year off, the degree is going to be 4 years, and even if you take one year off, you can come and continue it later. If it is 1 year, it is a certificate. Second year, it will be a diploma. Third year, it is degree. If you are continuing fourth year, it will be an added advantage for your research.
The shift in the digital pedagogy is also a very important feature that highlights inclusive, participatory and holistic approach for the educators and learners.
Online classes for after-school programs can be very useful for students everywhere. We can broaden the horizon by tapping into talents all around the world. Like, for example, a child can have the opportunity to learn music, ballet, or Mandarin from a teacher in a different country.
So it was a great compilation of thoughts from various education leaders across the country, and thank you YFLO for making the effort to compile such a video with such a great effort going across various parts of the country to do that. So just moving on with the session, Ms. Vasvi, I wanted to know, see, a lot of play-based, inquiry-based pedagogies have been already in play in a lot of schools, including your own, and their inclusion in the policy seems quite exciting. But the question is, do we have enough learning evidences in India that support this inclusion in the policy?
I think it's a known fact that if you listen to something, it may get absorbed. But if you do something with your own hands, it will definitely be learned in a way that you will never forget it. So I am a big believer in the play-based method. And we also know that from first-hand experience and from research that the 0 to 8 years is extremely important and crucial for the growth and development in any child's lifetime. So getting this foundation right from the beginning is extremely important because it has far-reaching effects on your school life, college life, work, and has effects on the individual and also on society as a whole. We all know that children are the happiest when they are engrossed in play. And this can happen in all types of methods, indoor play, outdoor play, various ways. But all it means is activity-based and hands-on learning. And there are many ways of doing this, and there are many values of it. There's a physical value is the first one, where children play together. They develop, it's good for their health and muscular development, helps them remain fit. The second, there's an intellectual value to it, because when the child is in a non-threatening environment, he is more curious to learn. There is much greater learning that happens. There's a social value. Children play with each other, they engage with each other, they learn how to, take their turn, wait for each other, help each other, work in groups. And there's also an emotional value because it helps them come into their own, overcome things like shyness, stress, sensitivity. What it does, it ensures a freedom for the child, so they can develop in the way they want, with creativity and imagination. There are many examples of this, of using games like even bingo and tambola and antakshari to teach various concepts of English and maths. There are many ways. Even cooking can be used to teach so many concepts of science. The question is it planned? It is absolutely planned. If you may enter a classroom where the playway method is being applied, and it may look like chaos, but you can be rest assured that it is absolutely planned. There is a structure to it, and there is a goal at the end of it. In terms of assessment, this kind of method is assessed quite differently. The standard way of assessing is that you give an exam or you give a test, and you judge how much the child has learned on the basis of that one exam or test. Here, the assessment has to be a continuous process, and there can be many ways of doing the assessment. It would be conversations with the child, small tests, it could be observation, it could be also speaking to their parents. So the main thing is that the learning objectives need to be achieved, whether it's cognitive skills, numeracy, literacy, whatever the milestones that we're hoping to achieve. The way of assessing success is to see that those milestones are achieved.
Thank you so much. Dr. Anjum, I was curious to know, you briefly brought on the 21st century skills, and there's a lot of discussion around the 21st century skills that we get to hear. What measure of those 21st century skills have been addressed into this policy, or what is missing, let's say, also to talk about that, mainly around critical thinking, mainly about the collaborative aspects of things, and so many of these 21st century skills which have become quite critical for everyone.
So yes, thank you, Mr. Deshpande. If you would allow me, just let me highlight what 21st century skills are to the audience. Those who don't know, commonly known as the 4 C's. So namely, communication has also always been important in education. So it's communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking skills. I personally have added a 5th C to it, and I think character is just as important. So I think that's probably that 5th C of character building. I feel that that's not specifically mentioned. Otherwise, the other skills are mentioned. So why have educators for the last, say, decade or so, why have they been talking about 21st century skills? It's because the nature of the future and the 21st century is constant change. Change is happening so rapidly, so fast, things get outdated very, very fast. And that's why it's very important to learn, unlearn, relearn constantly. So it really doesn't matter which syllabus you're following. This is what global educators are saying. It's really about these transferable skills that children should have within them to face these kind of unprecedented future that lies ahead of them. And then bang, the pandemic happened and we were in VUCA times, extremely volatile, unprecedented, complex, and ambiguous. So when we have these transferable skills, we're able to apply it to different situations. So while the NEP talks about creativity, talks about critical thinking, and these have been buzzwords, it doesn't really specify very clearly how do we do it. Yes, coding is mentioned and this is mentioned, and but like for example, Project Zero at Harvard University has been working for the last few decades on how is it that we can actually build creativity. So creativity is not the same as having an art technique. Creativity is the way that an individual is allowed to express themselves in a creative way. When we look at critical thinking, the reason why rote learning is not is being done away with is because rote learning is actually the very, very basic. It's a lower order thinking skill, just having recall. So higher order thinking skills would be on how we apply it, how we analyze it, how do we evaluate, how do we synthesize, different bits of information. And what is also relevant in the 21st century is that information doesn't have as much value. Information is everywhere. Whereas in the past, decades ago, memorizing that information was very important. Now that you have information at your fingertips, what is it that you can do with that information? How do you apply, analyze, synthesize, or create something new with that information? So it does mention design thinking, and design thinking would be a combination of critical thinking and creativity, but it also requires a lot of empathy as well. So design thinking starts with empathy, and that would be in the social and emotional learning aspect of it. So how should we teach social and emotional learning? So enlightened schools like Sri Ram and Glendale, we will know how to do that for our children. I've been a big advocate of the theory of multiple intelligences and the application of that. And when we look at the 8 different intelligences and then you put the 21st century skills next to it, they're actually very synergistic and congruent. If you build one, you're automatically building the other. So I think the ECE model that the NEP talks about, it doesn't say multiple intelligence, but it does cover all those aspects. So knowing it is not enough. It's about how do we cultivate it? And that's the next part. So we have a motto at school that says the more ways you teach, the more children you reach. So you have different types of learners, and some can learn auditory, some are visual learners, some are very kinesthetic learners. But Dr. Howard Gardner, who proposed the theory of multiple intelligence, says is that when you can teach in more ways, you are creating multiple pathways in your brain in order to conceptually understand what is at hand. And that's really also what is mentioned in the NEP is conceptual understanding rather than rote learning. So it also has talked about holistic report cards. That's very welcome. We're already doing that. We do test and show things on all the different physical parameters, all the social emotional learning. Now there's so many different psychometrics that can be done. And to give this holistic report card is going to be really, really wonderful. And I would love to see probably in the future, we already have a wonderful Diksha app that India has for the last couple of years. It's really come in handy now with this pandemic. It's kind of a national repository, and I think it is also in different languages. Probably we need to build on that. So all these different multiple things that the NEP is talking about, if we can have those things available, in something like Diksha or other methods, it would be accessible to the tier 2, 3, 4, students and schools. And that's really what's important. We see that there's a digital divide right now, and we need to see going forward, can this type of education be accessible to all and not just the higher socioeconomic stratas?
Thank you so much. Dr. Savita, there has been a lot of emphasis on technology in this policy. Also, the use of technology has got necessitated during this COVID crisis, where every school now is teaching online. Also, there has been an influx of technology in our daily lives, and also it's percolated down to children. So what, in your view, from a psychological point of view, are the effects of use of technology on brain development? What are the plus sides of it, and what are the negative sides of it?
Hidesh, thanks so much for asking me that question. I was in fact wanting this because I think parents out there are most concerned today about the psychological impacts of technology. They know there is a plus, they know there is a minus, they want to know how to handle the minus. And I'd like to say that if I were young today, if I were a school-going child today, I would want to go to a school like Anjum's or Vasavi's, because I think if I think I'm clever, hopefully they would convert me into a genius with all the kind of teaching techniques and methodology that they are talking about. And I will say the reason for this is there are two sensitive periods of development in every child's life. The first 3 years is the biggest growth spurt. The second growth spurt comes during adolescence and puberty. And this is the time when all education, all learning is at a very sensitive period. There is also something called as brain plasticity. While we have this almost through our lives, the biggest period of this plasticity is up to 15 years. Again, the biggest plasticity is in the first 3 years of your life, and thereafter in your pubertal period when maximum number of changes are happening in your body, and very, very importantly, in your brain as well. To give you a little understanding, the neural pathways that are being formed in the first 3 years of your life are to the extent of 1 million plus new connections per second. That's the kind of growth and development you are talking about. So whatever we expose our children to, if we are careful how we expose it to them in the first 3 years of their life and thereafter in the adolescent period of their life, we will not go wrong because we have taken care of the sensitive age group of development as far as these children are concerned. When we talk about brain plasticity, it refers to experience-related changes. So what are the different experiences that you are having and how is it changing? And therefore, some of the neural pathways continue, some get more reinforced, and some fall by the wayside because not enough experience is happening in those areas. Now, if we talk about technology, there is one area that is getting more and more enhanced, more and more used, and therefore developing more and more. The danger is those areas that are not getting used so much in terms of physical, in terms of motor skills, in terms of social and emotional skills. Some of these will not get utilized so much, and therefore we will need to have renewed focus in development in these areas. One of the commonest problems with technology has been isolation. So when people tend to use technology a lot, they're very comfortable being isolated because it is them and the object of their technology, for instance. For some of us, it could be a phone, but if you're talking about youngsters, their technology is spread into so many different areas. So when they're in school, they might use computers. When they come home, they might use their laptops or their tablets. Most of the in-between time, they're on their phones. So most of their accessing is in fact happening on the phone. For a lot of youngsters, especially in the pubertal age, there is a lot of gaming. So there is digital use in the gaming area. So there is a flood of technology that children are being exposed to. Isolation is one area where you can see the impact that children then prefer to do things by themselves. Even if it means catching up with a friend, youngsters will not really pick up the phone and call their friend, even if it's their mobile phone. They will chat. So they could chat on Instagram, they could just chat on some chat box. So they will use technology for connectedness and not so much a face-to-face interaction. Some of these things are imperative. Group-based activity is absolutely imperative for social skills, for social emotional skills. That cannot be replaced. And my hope is that technology is not allowed to replace that, because a lot more education can happen in a group that is not going to happen when you're one-on-one, because you're never bouncing yourself off other people, getting their feedback, re-educating yourself. All of that is not happening. One problem also with technology is that sleep gets impacted. You're by yourself till late at night. You may be technology dependent, and so therefore sleep does not really happen. So that is again a big impact of technology. However, I will still say the DSM-4, that is, it's a diagnostic manual of psychiatry and psychology. So the DSM-4 started off with a classification, and they tried to call it internet gaming disorder or excessive internet use, but they have held back from actually making a classification, a diagnostic classification. One of the reasons for this is not enough robust research is available. So while we say it's a problem, as psychologists and psychiatrists, we yet cannot classify and say that this is a diagnosed problem, but we can say that, look, this is a problem, let's be careful, let's try and balance this. So in rounding up, what I will say is the best key to growth and development, particularly in the first 3 years, which is the biggest growth spurt for children, And then the adolescent period. In these years, if we as parents, teachers, society at large, if we can create a balance, that will be the best kind of development for a child. So if we can create multiple areas of stimulus for the child, not just one area of stimulus, which is technology, but multiple areas of stimuli for every child, then I think that will be the best way a child can actually benefit.
Thank you so much. Ms. Vasvi, I just wanted to understand, typically the education so far has been always about filling in more. Whenever we talk, we say, okay, the child needs to know this, child needs to know that, and so on. Practically, the teacher wants to teach the most, the student wants to learn the least. Now, in between this dichotomy, if one would say, where does the national education policy places us? Is it on the more side, or is it kind of rationalizing what is being delivered to children and making their life easier and better?
So as we spoke about earlier, the NEP is talking about reducing curriculum. You know, the Indian systems of ICSE and CBSE and all the other state boards, I mean, you all know how vast the curriculum is, and how the minute we leave school, we forget. I mean, we mug it up, we give that exam, and then we completely forget. But the idea of education is not that. The idea of education is imbibing the knowledge to use it for the rest of your life. The idea of education is to learn certain skills. As Anjum said, you know, there are certain critical skills. So I'm very happy to see that there has been a move to say that we will reduce the curriculum and make it more functional, make it slightly tighter, and focus on the learning skills and the outcomes, focus on the output. What is it that we are looking at for our children to leave school with? It's not just the number of books they study, but what is the learning that they are taking with them? And there's a focus on skill development. There's a focus on, even soft skills are also part of this now. They're also talking about soft skills like communication, which is all part of 21st century skills. Hoping to see this come into play, because I think it will really make it easier for our students and our teachers. Because unfortunately, the teachers are trying to teach more because that's what the curriculum is demanding. And the way they are rushing to complete the curriculum, it doesn't remain interesting or fun for the students. So we can do that. Hopefully, the teachers will be able to teach less, and the students will themselves want to learn more.
Great. So Dr. Anjum, now that the online experiences have become necessary for us, what do you think one should do, especially from the educator side as well as from the learner side, to make this online experience more robust and more enriching?
Thank you for giving me that question, Mr. Deshpande, because that's been one of my core areas, aside from multiple intelligence. So brain-based learning. And there's a very nice quote from Eric Jensen, who introduced brain-compatible learning. He said that it's about when we can learn how we learn, then we all get smarter in life. So before we talk about the computers that we're using for online learning, we need to understand our own CPU, our own computer. And that is why I was talking about the why being so important. So all these things that are listed as the what, we know from neuroscience that when there is a lecture, you can only retain about 5% of recollection will be there from a lecture. When you read something, it's only about 10%, right? But when you can have a discussion with someone about the topic at hand, your recollection and your conceptual understanding goes all the way up to about 50%. So understanding these basics of passive and active learning, we need to make sure that the online scenario is not just repeating that same ineffective chalk and talk method. Just like chalk and talk is kind of an outdated, I'm not saying you don't use it, but you need to keep changing the modality in a physical classroom, in the online scenario, you have to have time for facilitated interactions. So like Zoom has breakout rooms. You may have a asynchronous component where the children have, read something, watched some videos, and then they come and that time is used to discuss in smaller groups. And the teacher is facilitating that. Just the way that the Sage on Stage model has been outdated for decades, because knowledge is multiplying at such astronomical rates, and it's just available, on your fingertips. It's not about how much you know. So the teacher's role is a guide on the side. So even as we've shifted to the virtual space, they still need to be that guide on the side, and they need to be able to facilitate between asynchronous and synchronous learning. The other thing that I would want to say is that there are a lot of virtual tools that can help teachers teach more effectively. But if you feel that a lecture is boring in class, just imagine how boring and how zoned out kids are going to be if they're hearing a lecture on, the screen. So there's a lot of different things that you can do to make it interactive aside from breakout rooms. You have like little surveys that you can take polls, you can use Mentimeters. There's things like Kahoot will give you like a little quiz, and it's just for that instant recall. So whatever your working memory is, it'll help you kind of recall that in kind of a fun way. You can use Padlets. The kids can kind of post things that they're learning. What we're doing to kind of keep up our own wellness formula is the whole person approach. So every fortnight, we're concentrating on either the heart with gratitude and kindness, or we're doing the body with physical, fitness little challenges, or spending time in nature, or doing something sustainable with the environment. And then the kids are posting what they're doing, on Padlets. You also have Flipgrids, Jamboards, Quizlets. I mean, there's so many actual virtual tools out there that can help the teachers actually teach better or facilitate better. And those are the things that schools, tier 2, 3 schools, they need that training. We've actually over the summer kind of compiled a Glendale online encyclopedia of virtual terms and tools that can actually be used. And if you contact the school, it's available. Anyone can actually access that. Is there anything else that I have not answered in your question?
I think that's great. And there's so much that you could tell, but we will move on. Yeah. And to Dr. Savita, I wanted to know with online experiences, with online learning that's happening, what practices could be implemented at home when parents are proctoring their children? What practices they should encourage among the children, especially to balance the development as well as to also ensure that that learning experience is really useful.
Thank you so much. I'm going to answer your query, but I'm also going to add a little bit on play and the psychology involved with that in my answer, if you don't mind. With the use of technology, one of the things that was found was that you can actually make technology positive if you make it, let's say, co-use or co-viewing. So let's say if the child is watching a show on their laptop in their room, again, there is isolation. And I must emphasize, as a psychologist, isolation is one of the worst things that you can do in your growth and development. You tend to withdraw, and withdrawing and isolation is not good for your social and emotional development at all. So instead of that, if that same activity is brought into, within the gamut of the family, and the same show is watched by the whole family together, then that becomes a positive use of technology. And after that show, there inevitably is a discussion on what you saw, what you disagreed with, what you liked, what should the actor have done, what should the female actor have done, and so on and so forth. So I think co-viewing makes technology move into a positive area. And if family can use technology, but in a joint manner rather than in an excluding manner, I think that will be a positive use of technology. In some ways, this can actually be made to happen. I wanted to talk about play as well, if I may. As a psychologist, I get a lot of young children and I need to assess them. Now, when it comes to adults, you can assess them with various kinds of tests and inventories, with a lot of interviewing and so on and so forth. But when it comes to children, you're not going to get information if you try to interview a child and ask the child a lot of questions. You're not going to get much information because the child hates to talk with strangers and the child is going to withdraw and completely clam up. So one of the methods that psychologists will use is play, not just for therapy, but even for assessment. So you give the child some pieces of paper, some crayons, some sketch pens, let's say. You spread a carpet on the floor. The child sits down on the carpet. You also sit down on the carpet along with the child. And you pretend to be playing as much as the child is playing. So the child is playing on a piece of paper. You are playing on another piece of paper. And then slowly you move together and you start, exchanging your papers, or you start doing stuff on the child's paper. And from there, you build a rapport with the child, and then you start getting a lot of information from the child that you will be surprised. I mean, parents are surprised as to how the child has given you so much of information. And the reason I'm saying this is to emphasize the role of play. If it is so important in assessment, it can be even more important when it comes to education. So I think play is extremely important. Another thing that play will do is it will take away the anxiety from education. The purpose of education is learning. We have two systems in our brain. The emotional system comes from the limbic system. That's not so new, but the newer part of our brain in development, which only human beings have, is the cerebral cortex, which sits on top of our head. More particularly the frontal and the prefrontal cortex, where a lot of this higher education and higher learning activity is happening in terms of analytical thinking, strategizing, all of problem solving. All of this is happening from here. This works best if there is no anxiety. So if you take away anxiety, you are actually going to help the cerebral cortex, the prefrontal lobe, the frontal lobe, all of these to function the way they are supposed to function. Get into analysis, get into learning and absorbing that learning, and not just in terms of anxiety to reproduce. So if you can take anxiety away from education, you will actually get the best out of a child. And the current system, somehow or the other, is very anxiety provoking. I remember when I was in school, maybe in second, third, fourth grade or something like that, the typical way that teachers wanted to know how much you knew was to ask a student to stand up and ask them a question. And a lot of students would lose their voice the moment the teacher would ask you to stand up and ask you a question. Not because you don't know the answer, not because you don't have that information. You probably know everything and more, But the anxiety of that act of standing up in front of the whole class, there is so much anxiety that you stutter, you mutter, and then you forget what it is that you were supposed to be saying, So I feel that if whatever we do going forward, in some way, if we can take away anxiety from education, that will be like a blessing for all children. They will learn without anxiety. They will learn because there is a natural curiosity, and every child has a curiosity to learn. That does not need to come from the outside. The first thing the child will ask you when the child gets a voice and gets maybe 2-3 words, bringing together in terms of a sentence is why. So why this, why that, and you as a parent get fed up answering the whys. So curiosity is an absolutely natural part of a child. Education needs to positively stroke that curiosity and not kill that curiosity with so much of anxiety. So rote learning and all of these things, yes, but I'm saying the broad category of anxiety. If we can focus on removing anxiety from education and facilitating calmness, the brain functions best when it is calm. So if you want to make the body work well, you exercise the body, push the body, really make the body struggle. The body will function really well. But if you want to get the best out of the brain, then you teach the brain relaxation techniques. The more relaxation techniques the brain learns, the more it imbibes as a personality, you will be able to get the best out of the brain. So any education system needs to take anxiety out of the brain first of all.
Yes, thank you so much. I think it was a great answer. And I still get anxious when I ask questions to you, to all three of you. So I can very well agree with what you said. So what we'll do is we will move on to a few questions from the attendees today. And there are very nice questions which have come. A lot of them we will not be able to take all, but perhaps we will be able to take one. So that's what we will do. And to go to Swasvi, the question is, could you point 2 to 3 basic points which you feel will be very difficult to implement, which are mentioned in this policy?
The first one and the most important one is the teacher training. I think Anjum also pointed to this, that this is a very long process, but without it, I feel there can be no transformation that we can have in any education system, not just in India, but anywhere, because teachers truly are the backbone. You know, it's not the buildings and the labs and the fields that make up a school. It's actually the teaching community. And it has to be an ongoing process. Currently, the B.Ed that is offered in our country was made in the 1800s. So that just goes to show how regressive it may be and how it hasn't actually taken into account anything that has changed over all these years. So we would need a better curriculum for the B.Ed. We would need many more organizations that offer it. We would need to make teacher training must have in classroom experience. You know, right now you can be sitting at home and doing a teacher training with an online agency and not have actually stepped into the classroom. So you don't know what is actually required. So I think teacher training is one of the teacher handling, teacher training, induction of the right teachers. That is one big component. The other one, which I feel is very critical, is the change in the curriculum that we have discussed many times. The government is talking about putting in one curriculum for the whole country. Right now we have multiple boards, and they're all at various standards. So I think that is going to be one other thing that is going to actually be a game changer if that comes in. And the third one I would say is the, all the assessment structures that they are putting in. I think that would also, so these are all actually very, very critical, but are all going to be difficult. But let's hope and see that the government puts in structures that enables all of them to happen.
Dr. Anjum, just in continuation of what was spoken earlier by Ms. Vasvi, this is the next question. How can better teacher training be implemented in schools? You have been a teacher trainer for a very, very long time, and none other than you could be in a better position to answer this.
Oh, there's so much that I can say about that. I don't know where to start. So last year we did something called the culture of thinking, and we trained our entire staff on that. And that's also from Harvard's Project Zero. And they had 10 principles. And the first principle was that if you can create that type of whatever you aspire for your students, you create those same type of conditions for the teachers so that they can then do that for the students. So whenever I do my teacher training program, I become the teacher, they are my students, and we are exploring all our multiple intelligences. So we're doing a nature meditation outside, we're singing and doing music, we're doing craft, we're building things with, those Montessori equipments, we're making collages, they're reciting poetry. So they are tapping into their own multiple intelligences. And this summer, I actually led a program called Sharpen the Saw, a guided self-discovery for teachers. And it became quite popular, like thousands of teachers did it. And it was the first time probably where the teachers were tapping into their own intelligences as a person, rather than you learn something and you need to learn this so that you can teach it to the children. So I think the more you invest in developing the teacher as a whole person, like a multifaceted person, and I actually, Mr. Deshpande, I think that's my life calling. I love discovering my own multifaceted potential. I love being able to inspire people to discover their and optimize their multifaceted potential. And when we can create those type of conditions within our schools, then they can create those for our students. So we almost, as schools, have to invest just as much training for the teachers as we do for trying to carry it out for our students. And I think with just going with research, back your best practices with research. And from my book, I'll just share one ABC. One is attention. You need to understand that what gets children's attention. You talked a little bit about curiosity a little bit before, but what is it that can sustain attention? So in this digital space that we are in, I think a parent and an educator need to ask themselves, what is it that I can do that a smart device cannot do? And that's really a lot of the social and emotional component. It's the bonding and connecting. When we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, intellectual needs are like right in the middle of that pyramid. So in the base is your physiological needs, and then it's your safety needs. But is it, say, emotionally safe for me to clear a doubt? Is it emotionally safe for me to say that, you know what, ma'am, I don't understand. Can you explain it to me again? So safety is not just physical safety, it's also emotional safety. Is that child free from bullying? Nutrition, right? That would be like food and hydration. And then it would say the need to belong, right? Love and belonging is a very basic human need. That is the third tier. Now, have you created sort of a sense of community in the class where the children have bonded and connected with one another? Do you know that child as an individual yourself? Where are we going to create a holistic 360-degree report card if the teacher has not invested time in really getting to know that student as an individual? And then is your self-esteem needs, right? For a child, for an individual. So how have we as teachers enabled a sense of self-esteem or self-efficacy? Have we communicated that we believe the children can do this, that they are capable of going beyond just the basic recall? Have we tapped into what they are also capable of in multiple different ways and facets of who they are as individuals? And then it's your intellectual needs. So without addressing these basic human needs of an individual, I don't think that we can be successful in educating or in teaching. So that's A. And B is when I talked about the more you are involved with the body-mind connection is there. As Vasavi had mentioned, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. So active processing of the information facilitated in a class, that's actually very, very more important. The more you get involved, the more you understand conceptually. So the teachers have to create situations like that. And for that, the teachers have to be trained. The schools have to know how to actually season these teachers. And it's like I said, it's a long process. I'm warning you, it's not easy. It doesn't happen overnight for them to unlearn and relearn a new way of teaching. And then the last thing that I'll conclude is C, is challenging but non-threatening. So Savita talked about reducing anxiety levels. And yes, what happens is executive function in the front part of your brain will shut down when the fight or flight mechanism, when it experiences a threat, or even it's a perceived threat or anxiety. And our brains don't function. They can shut down almost 75%. So when it's boring, it's very, the brain will tune out. If it's too much challenge, it kind of clams up. So you kind of have to find that sweet spot in education to be challenging but non-threatening. And I think that if you use the level of learning that Bloom's prescribes, all the critical thinking skills, you will do that. Lead by a question. Pablo Picasso said that computers are actually quite stupid. They can only give you answers. It's only a human being that can ask the question. So when that 4-year-old will never ask as many questions as they do at that age, so lead with curiosity, lead with a higher order thinking question, and take your teaching from there, and beautiful things can happen.
Thank you so much. That we are 12:45. We are all nearly done with the time, and we should value the time and follow the time. So what I would request the organizers is to take us to the closing part of this session.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is it okay if we share the questions put up with y'all and y'all can answer those questions later on live? If we can email, yeah? All right. Thank you.
A big thank you to our panelist and moderator for a very engrossing and interesting session with some insightful answers to the questions by our ladies. It definitely kept us engrossed and cleared a lot of our doubts about NEP. A reminder for our next event on Tuesday with the author Nidhi Duggar of the book The White as Milk and Rice. Please do join in for an exquisite journey about the tribes of India. I now invite Deepti Reddy, our Vice Chairperson, to give the vote of thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. I just loved what all our panelists spoke, and it was really good to know so much about education in this challenging time. Thank you. Education is not the learning of facts, but the training of mind to think, is a famous quote told by Albert Einstein. So today we're enlightened with so much to know about education. Thank you so much. I would like to thank our panelists, Vasavi Bharatram, Savita Date Menon, Anjum Babukan, and our moderator, Hridesh Deshpande, for giving us a wonderful insight about our present education to shape our next generation. I would like to thank all our speakers who's given us beautiful information from the video, what they've shared, and answered to all the questions. Thank you. I would like to thank our IT and media team for their flawless and online experience. Thank you. I would like to thank YFLO and FLO chairpersons for your gracious presence made a difference today. Our committee for their boundless enthusiasm, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you all for your participation and encouragement. We indeed look forward to having more engrossing and power-packed events for all of you. Namaste.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anjum, Vasavi, Savita, Hridesh, all of you all. It was a brilliant session. I think we can go on and on, but time permits, we have to stop here. But I will share some questions because I think there are really interesting ones which we couldn't take because of time. I will email them to you.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us.
Thank you for inviting us.
Vasavi and Anjum, if you need help in your teacher training, include psychologists. I'm volunteering.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Savita. All the best, everyone.
All the best to all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.